great that it was on YouTube, because having missed 35 minutes on Thursday night trying to get in, being really frustrated.
Catch up.
Me
Yeah.
too.
It's nice to be able to go and watch the bits that I missed.
Yeah, I've had a difficulty even with the AGM, but hello, Valerie.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi.
We're live.
Hello.
Hello, Barbara.
Oh,
Hello,
Barbara, hi.
family.
It's me.
I was going to tell you, Brian, that I was hesitant to take part in this afternoon because I was always warned that you should
You've had to be the host.
you should never perform with
Children.
you never perform
That's
against animals and
That's
children. Barim. It's too. They're always going to upstage you. Hello, Stanley. Have you been to Bournemouth again?
16, Lauren.
Sorry.
Muted.
Oh, he's muted. You're
Harry,
muted.
are you in two places? You've got two screens.
Yes, I have been to Bournemouth.
Right. Nice to see you back.
Right.
Suntanned as usual.
Coming in here.
Had nice weather.
Yes, I'm sure you did. Yeah. It's often very nice there, isn't it?
Yeah. So you all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Reasonably.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hello.
All upset about what's going on in Israel, of course.
Terrible.
Ah,
It's 6:30 tonight. So.
I see what you mean, competing with children. There are two children
Yep.
in this one.
They're between.
No
Yeah.
animals yet.
No.
Hello, everybody.
Sam produces his dog.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
How long does Eliyahu Chaim have to talk? Half an hour?
5
An hour?
minutes.
5 minutes.
He can talk. Don't worry.
Okay. But I mean, I've built in a bit of flexibility,
Okay.
and we can run a little bit over. I think we need to finish by 4, so that those of us who need to finish our cooking before past 6 can do that. But I've built in a little bit of time for discussion, and a bit of time for we can. I think we should finish by 4, but we haven't got that much. Thanks, Brian. I've got right. Let me just.
Hello,
And sounds
Barbara.
quite interesting here.
We've already said something.
Sorry.
Have you?
Yeah,
I think Barbara's just turned
yeah,
up.
and waved us her.
Oh.
Right, let me just get Zaki's. Oh, it hasn't arrived yet. That's funny.
Lionel,
Yes.
at least if you're in competition with children, you're
Yes.
ahead of them. So you're out of the way before they start.
Yes, but I mean, yes.
Barbara's
You've got a
following.
problem. So you
Likewise.
may be able to. Yeah, you're in trouble.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm in
You're in
trouble.
trouble. Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I particularly arranged that.
I thought
I
you
think
might.
everyone will have gone home by the time it gets to me.
I'm interested in yours. I want to know what the hair is all about.
Jenny wanted Lucy to, right, so I said, I've got them, I'll send them to you, so I know she's got them. I said, I don't know what's going to happen. No, I don't know what's going to happen.
Jenny, you're the host. You can control the muting and everything.
Yeah. Okay, well, it is just after past, so I think if I can. Oh, how do I mute everybody?
I was going to ask a question.
Right.
I've sent it to you. Has it arrived?
Yes, yes. In fact, Zaki had already done that. Oh, I don't know how to mute it. Oh, mute all. Right, there we go. Okay. So, welcome to the second of our 3 Tikkun Leil Shavuot sessions, and hopefully more people will be joining us. But I think we should start now. The first thing is to apologise to anybody who tried and failed to join us Thursday evening. Unfortunately, although the clicking on the poster gave you the right login, if you actually followed the hyperlink, it didn't. So apologies to those who didn't make it at all, or to those who spent a long time scrabbling around trying to find somebody who could tell them how to get in. The second thing to say is that there's a request from Ian Patterson to all the speakers. Please could you send him either your whole presentation or a summary of it, whichever is easier for you. And he is then going to pick out some key bits to have a single article that he will write based on all the different talks from the 3 sessions. And later on, if I have time, and later in the week or next week, if I don't, I will email everybody with, or I'll email Ian and blind copy everybody else, so that you've got his email address if you don't. Now, we hope to have, in addition to the 7 talks, we also have to hope to have some discussion, at least after some of them, not necessarily all of them. And I think it's probably easiest if you want to chat or want to have a discussion, if you can either put a comment into the chat or just say comment or something, so I know to call on you. Does that make sense? And then we can have things either after each talk or say after every 2 talks. And then again, at the end, we can have something to wrap up. So I aim to finish by around 4 o'clock, because I've still got some preparing to do before the 6:30 session. So I would like to start by inviting Karen to unmute herself and share her screen.
Yeah, if you can, I can screen share, can I now? I won't do it just yet because I've got a bit to read out first, and then
You want to just check that it does work?
Oh, actually, yeah, I better check that it will actually work. Hang on, PowerPoint. Ooh.
Well, if you go to share and it doesn't say you aren't allowed to, then
Can you see it? Has anything come up?
Not yet.
Oh.
But if it didn't tell you, yes, you have to click on the share screen and then choose what you're sharing, and then click on the little right-hand corner.
Yeah, hang on. No,
you don't need to do that now. In fact, let me just give everybody the program. So I'm going to share screen. There
it is.
Yes, it's working, Karen. Fine.
Slideshow. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, here we are. Slideshow from beginning. There we are. Hey. Marvellous. Right, here we go. So my Tikkun talk this afternoon is on Soho, and particularly Jewish immigration into Soho, and looking at synagogues mainly, although a slight change of tack at the end. Just some background on Soho itself. The name Soho, we think, comes from an old 16th century hunting cry, Soho, because it was largely fields in that area, until the late 1600s, when it became a very fashionable area, when the Duke of Monmouth, one of Charles II's many illegitimate children, he didn't have any legitimate ones, built a house in Soho Square. And since then, there have been waves of immigrants into Soho, Greek Orthodox Christians, Huguenots who were French Protestants escaping persecution in France. The 1840s, huge numbers of people escaping the various revolutions that were occurring in different European countries. And then in the late 19th century, we see waves of immigration from Russia and Poland, of Jewish immigration. The Russian Jews had suffered terribly under the reign of Tsar Nicholas I, I should say, from 1825 to 1855, when there were 600 anti-Jewish edicts which were written into law in Russia. And things really came to a head then in 1881, when Tsar Alexander II was assassinated. And surprise, surprise, Jews were blamed for that assassination. So the Jews who settled into Soho and Fitzrovia, so the boundary really of those two areas is Oxford Street, which is Soho Square's here, and Oxford Street would just be above it. So that was the sort of demarcation line, if you like, between the Soho Jews down here in this area and the Fitzrovia Jews, one of whom was my daddy, and they tended to keep the two communities tended to keep quite separate. The Soho and Fitzrovia, I think Fitzrovia was a bit posher, and they tended to refer to the other side of Oxford Street, the community on the other side. But they did mix for certain things, but were largely two separate communities. So here's a map of the parts of Soho I'm going to be talking about. And we're going to start down here in Green's Court, which is where the first synagogue in the area opened, and that was called the West End Talmud Torah, and that was founded in 1880 with a minyan in a little shop here in Green's Court. And a little bit later here in Peter Street, there was a school called, sorry, I've lost my, oh, here we are. The Pulteney School in Peter Street is where the West End Hebrew and religious classes opened, and hundreds of children would attend Cheder here. And these shuls are small. They're very small Stiebel-like shuls, which is the sort of shul that these immigrants would have been used to in Russia and Poland, and much smaller than shuls that were opening in places like Bayswater and in the West End. So in 1916, the shul moves, because it's getting, the community's getting big, all the way up here to Manette Street. So here's Soho Square. Here's Greek Street running down, and so Manette Street is a little street that runs between Greek Street and Charing Cross Road, which is the sort of eastern boundary of Soho, if you like. And they move into 14 Manette Street. It had been a workhouse, I think a Christian place of worship at some point. But they take over this, and you can still see the house there, actually. I didn't get a chance to get there and take a photo, but if you walk along Manette Street, it's a rather nice little white building about 2/3 of the way along. On the left, well, it's only on the left-hand side because it's a building site on the other side at the moment. And around this time in 1916, it merges with Bikur Cholim, which had been in Brewer Street, and about 60% of its members, a large part of the membership, are tailors. That's their occupation. So I'm now going to show you another slide, if I can find it. I should just be able to go like that and I'll move on to the next slide. No, that didn't work. How am I going to get that to move along?
At the bottom, if you hover over the bottom white bit on the other side, on the left, if you hover,
oh, there it is. It appeared. I don't know quite how I did that. Now this is from a post. I took a picture from a postcard. Here's the postcard, which I found in this book, Living Up West by Jerry Black. And on the back of the postcard, it says, "Dear Reg," that's my dad, "enclosed book of the Jewish West End. Hope that you enjoy it. See you soon. Love to Sylvia." That was my mum. From Tessa, that was my auntie. So she bought my dad this book, which has been absolutely invaluable in putting this talk together. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from it now, actually, which gives you a flavour of what this shul was like. I think this might be quite a flattering picture in a way, because it sounds like it was quite basic. But this book is full of lots of quotes from people who lived there, which really brings it alive. So here's a little short paragraph. "The West End was a thriving community in those days, and we're talking post-First World War, with several shuls. The shul we went to was Manette Street, so there it is. It had hundreds, literally hundreds of Jewish boys and girls who went to Cheder from both sides of the borderline, from that being Oxford Street. We went 4 days, Monday to Thursday. We finished school at 4:30 and went home to let our parents know, and then on to Cheder. On Sunday, classes were from 11 till 1. There was a bar mitzvah almost every week. The lovely thing about it was that in those days, they gave you a year to learn it. All the women upstairs," and you can see the ladies' gallery up there, "all the women upstairs used to throw rice and mandelmann, which I think are sort of almond sweeties. Sometimes there was a kiddush downstairs. Parents were just working people. As I said, there was 60% of them were tailors. So most people would have a party at home, and all the family came and had salt beef and tongue." If you're listening, Clive, don't throw up. He hates tongue. And there's another little bit here. "I remember that Talmud Torah. It was a little building. I will tell you what it was like. Did you see the film The Jolson Story? Well, it was like the shul in that. It was dingy." It doesn't look that dingy in that postcard. "There was a ladies' gallery. What I remember was the Yom Tovim at the Scala Theatre." That was obviously, they had an overflow for the Yom Tovs. "When Rabbi Ferber delivered his sermon, all the women used to cry. he used to tell people off. Don't listen to that, Rabbi. I haven't seen him make any women cry so far. So in the 1940s, there was another merger with Beit HaSefer, which had been in Soho Square. And in fact, if you go into Soho Square, so if you walk from Greek Street up into Soho Square, the building directly on the right, that's where Beit HaSefer was. And there is still a mezuzah on the door of that building. Bikur Cholim and Beit HaSefer had both been founded in 1910. And after the two mergers, it was renamed the West End Great Synagogue. So we've heard a little bit about Rabbi Ferber, a little bit more about him. He was appointed as rabbi in 1913, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Ferber. His salary was £2 a week, and he had been born in Lithuania and was a great scholar. He wrote 22 books and owned thousands of books. Apparently he had a massive library. And he used to visit the Oriental Room at the British Museum on almost a daily basis, and knew more about the collection of centuries-old Hebrew books there in the British Museum than the curator himself. Now, in the 1960s, the shul moved to new premises in Dean Street, which is now the site of the Soho Theatre. And if you walk upstairs to the first floor of the theatre, you will find a plaque or mizrach on the eastern wall, which commemorates the presence of the shul there, and hopefully, there it is. So this is the plaque that's now in the Soho Theatre. So please God, when we all go back to the theatre, and if you're going to see something in Soho, just walk up to the first floor and you'll see this plaque there. Now, by the 1920s, there were 25,000 Jews living in the West End. Apart from tailoring, and we were talking about whereas the East End Jews were, I suppose you could say, were creating schmutters. The Jews, the tailors in the West End, in Soho, Fitzrovia, they were really catering to the high end of the market. So they were tailoring for the shops in Savile Row, and also to the theatre industry. But another popular occupation, interestingly, was that of publican. There were several pubs in Soho with Jewish publicans, including the Hercules Pillars, and that's still there on the corner of Greek Street and Manette Street, although I think it's now called the Pillars of Hercules, so it had a slight name change. And another one called the Blue Posts in Berwick Street. And rather cleverly, they put complimentary pickled herring, schmaltz herring, and anchovies on the bar, just the thing to work up a bit of the thirst. So they, Jews weren't there. I think these days the kids drink more than we used to, and certainly our parents and grandparents did. But it certainly encouraged people to have a few more drinks than they would otherwise have had. Not quite gastropub fare, but maybe it started a trend. So that's a quick whiz through the synagogues and the communities of Soho. Thank you for listening. If any, I've stopped screen sharing now.
Thank you very much. And wait a minute, let me just change my view so that I can see other people. Right. Yes, I've heard that it was quite common for Jews to be innkeepers and publicans in Eastern Europe in 100, 200 years ago, because unlike most of the locals, they were numerate and literate and therefore could keep the books. And unlike most of the locals, they were unlikely to drink away all the profits.
Indeed.
So I think it was Mark who told me that.
It's funny, David saying that he used to go to shul in Soho. Jackie and Jeremy are downstairs. Jenny, you know Jackie and Jeremy Marshall, and Jackie also, when she was at the Middlesex Hospital, she I'm sure she said earlier that she used to go to a shul there. She thinks probably when it was in Dean Street.
Yes,
Soho Theatre.
It was Dean Street. I remember when we went to the theatre there, David saying, I used to come here to go to the shul.
Yes.
Aviva, you had a comment or question for Karen.
Yeah, Karen, I just wondered why they settled in Soho. What was it about Soho that had room for all these immigrants?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. I mean, I think historically it always had been a place of immigration. And you already had a lot of Europeans there, so maybe they knew that was, I mean, you had far more in the East End, but the East End was a much poorer area, and the Jews that settled in Soho and Fitzrovia were already a little bit better. They tended to be the better off ones. They came with a bit more money than the ones that settled in the East End. So I guess it's just a slightly nicer area, although some of the places where they lived, trying to think of the name, there's a block of flats, and it won't come to me for the minute, where a lot of the tailors lived there, and the conditions weren't great, to be honest, but probably better than the East End, so you had to be a little bit better off to live there. Sorry.
Because presumably the Angels Outfitters, I haven't read the story about them, but their immigration, their grandparents or great-grandparents must have come there and hooked onto the fact that they were tailors and there was a theatre industry.
Yes, well, absolutely. So again, because of theatre, and they were creating all the bits and bobs and the props and all the little bits that you'd add to the costumes and that sort of thing were being created. Royalty, I think it was Royalty Mansions in the little, in Mead Street, that's right. I think there might even still be a little plaque there. So, and there were various disputes, there were sort of strikes and walkouts to try and get better working conditions. So although they were producing goods for the higher end of the tailoring trade, they still weren't being paid very fairly. So at one point they all went on strike, and I think their East End cousins sort of came out on strike with them to get better working conditions, which eventually they did.
Very interesting. I shall wander around Soho with new eyes now.
Do, yes.
Or perhaps we can, Karen, you can organise a walking tour from us.
I mean, I do a tour on immigration generally, which includes obviously the Jewish story. So this is sort of adapted, and I've added more to it from that.
Maybe when the weather's better and people are happier to mingle.
Absolutely, yes, that'd be great.
Something. Thank you very much. I think it's probably time to move on, and this is the whole programme for this afternoon session. So next I'd like to invite Lionel to unmute and to give us his talk. Where's Lionel? Have we lost Lionel? He was definitely here at the beginning of this. Oh, let me just see in case there's some sort of email from him. That's strange, because Lionel was definitely here before we started.
Jenny, do you want me to phone him up?
Yes, please. Maybe what we could do is, because it may be, I don't know if he's got a Wi-Fi problem or something. Zaki, would you be willing to talk next?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. So if you can share your screen, which you should be able to now, then that's great. And if not, I'll...
Can you all see it?
Perfect.
Okay. So, hi, my name is Zaki. Since the past few years, I've started to come to shul more often, and I wanted to share with you my experiences of being Jewish. First and foremost, Judaism means to me happiness and positivity, as it is mitzvah gedolah lehiyot b'simcha tamid. It is a mitzvah to be happy. For me, festivals are very important, as they are special days when a miracle has happened in the past, and we remind ourselves that God will create miracles in the future. Something that I like doing, but not many other people like doing, is going to shul, because I can get closer to my grumpy and be a part of praying to Hashem and singing Anim Zemirot. I also like being with the Rabbi's children. I like praying to Hashem so I can feel closer to him and thank him for all the good things he has done, and I can ask him for forgiveness for any bad things I may have done. I also feel proud of being Jewish, and I like Hashem because I feel like there is something bigger and greater than us out there that I can ask for help if we need him. While I ask my friends, what is it to be Jewish? They do not give me a straight answer, but what they say is being happy and having fun. But in my view, being Jewish comes with both responsibilities and challenges. My responsibility is sharing with my friends and the world that Judaism isn't such a bad religion and Israel isn't such a bad country. That responsibility is to live up to the standard. We need to remember that we are one big family and we should not fight or talk badly of each other. As a Jew, I want to make sure that people know that Judaism isn't a bad religion, and it's actually a religion of love, caring, and sharing. My favorite mitzvah is that of chesed, giving to others. I like it so much because it makes me feel good to help others in need. My favorite holiday is Hanukkah, not just because we receive presents for 8 days, but also because I know that others will be making the mitzvah of giving, and many other children will be very happy. My favorite historical figure is Abraham, as he was special and generous, as he was very special and generous to others and totally selfless. He had 4 doors in his tent, and he would welcome other people in to eat and have fun. I would also like to take this opportunity to honor my parents and grandparents, as without them I would not be here. I would like to especially thank my grumpy, whom I love to the moon and back, and I will forever remember and cherish all our special times together, both at shul and outside of shul. I want to finish off by wishing you all a happy Shavuot, which is to remember when we received the Torah from Mount Sinai, and we will all hopefully learn a lot about being kind to each other.
Thank you very much. Yishar Koach.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to make any comments or ask Zaki anything, if you're happy to take questions?
I think that was excellent, Zaki. Well done.
Thank you very much.
And Ian Patterson would like to include some bits from people's talks. I don't think you weren't here when I mentioned just before. Ian Patterson wants to include bits from everybody's talks in the next issue of NU. So I'll send you and Grumpy his email address so that perhaps you can send him. He's going to cut the talks down so that he can fit everybody's in. But
we're so proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
There are lots of comments and compliments in the chat. But someone wants to know if your grandpa is really grumpy.
Yes, he is. That was outstanding.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to move on to Lionel. Zaki, if you mute and Lionel can unmute. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
All right, these things happen.
Something technological defeated me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Well, if you want me to start.
Yes, please do.
First of all, I add my compliments to everyone else on Zaki's talk. It was wonderful. Well done, Zaki. I knew in the end I was upstaged. That's right. Right. So my title, I think, was Who Selected the Psalms for Hallel? Well, everyone who has listened to my Devarim will know how much I admire the Psalms, and especially the collection of the 6 Psalms known as the Hallel. I will be glad to be hearing them again tomorrow, this Shavuot, the full set. They are amongst our oldest prayers, songs really, predating Seder Amida and Aleinu, and were sung in the temple by our ancestors. The lyrics are the same, but not, of course, the music. But we can, if we choose, so easily when we sing the Hallel, imagine ourselves in the temple among the throng, sacrifice in hand, as we progress with each psalm closer to the altar. To this end, it may be helpful to have an individual ancestor in mind, for the later psalms are individualistic and thus written in the first person singular. The Psalms are one of our greatest gifts to humanity, and at Prince Philip's recent funeral, for example, Psalm 104 was chosen for the prayers, as always is the case on great occasions. Who collected the ones for the Hallel? No one knows. But in this Devar, I seek to imagine from clues in these particular Psalms, the backstory of the Jew, your great, etc. grandfather, who stood at the outset outside the temple. Let's call him Korach ben Shtam Ephes. The year had again started badly for your forefather. Once more, last year, his selection of psalms with his newly composed musical setting had failed to win the annual competition, as had been the case in all previous years of his submissions. He did not trust the princes on the adjudication panel, as always one of their favourites would win. Much worse, however, his wife had had her fifth miscarriage, and he was in despair, as again she was pregnant, and he knew the likely consequence. Kind words uttered by her friends, delivered of numerous children, had only deepened the wound. He scraped by as a beekeeper, but this year he was reduced to absolute penury. Not only had some blight affected his bees, but two of his best hives had disappeared, and two, suspiciously like his, had appeared on his neighbour's land. His neighbour had been boasting about their abundance, and Korach had called him to account. His neighbour strenuously rejected Korach's claims, and others supported his neighbour's explanation. In a rage, he had called them all liars, which he immediately regretted, and felt far worse when later the hives turned up in a serial thief's cart with all the money gone. He was in despair and almost suicidal. Nonetheless, he never lost his faith and prayed as ever passionately to Hashem. He certainly was in no mood to offer a collection of psalms this year, but Devorah, his wife, encouraged him to do so, to take his mind off his worries. But he had no will or inspiration left. But towards the end of the year, lo and behold, Devorah gave birth to a healthy girl, a day before the final psalm's submission date. There's still time, said Devorah. Go for it. What shall I choose? He asked. Choose those that relate to our year, but make the music joyful. You're a beekeeper. Find one at least about bees, said Devorah. And so, drawing on his experience of the year, yes, of course, he won. As his collection of psalms, the Hallel, was sung to his beautiful music, as was the custom, as the victor, he was seated with the princes of the tribes. And thus we have, and you can look out for at tomorrow's Hallel recitation, the following. In Psalm 113, he raises the poor from the dunghill, and seats him with the princes of his people. And also, he makes the barren woman a joyful mother of children. In Psalm 115, he will bless both great and small. And when the pangs of death encircled me and the anguish of the grave overtook me, I invoked the name of the Lord. You delivered my soul. I was brought low, and you saved me. I trusted you, even when in my haste I said, all men are liars. And in Psalm 118, it is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. And later, those that hate me surrounded me like bees. Korach did well. Think about him when we next say Hallel. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you very much.
Can't be much discussion on that, Jenny.
Well, thank you very much. And where are we?
May I make a comment?
Please do.
line you were talking about bees. As I recall, Korah's 2 of his sons came to a sticky end.
Aha, that's a very good comment, Brian. You're on form this weekend, aren't you?
Thank you.
And his wife's name is Devorah, which I think is Hebrew for bee.
Is it really?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. From the
Well,
root of
I've learned something as well. There
Yeah.
we are. So that was very appropriate. I wish
very
I'd known.
appropriate.
Okay,
Very
so-
nice, Lionel. Hallel's one of my favourite parts of the Yom Tov service, always.
Well, yes, we'll hear it tomorrow.
And you know, everybody's welcome to come to shul and sing, but quietly.
Yes.
Under current rules. So if we now move on to Eliyahu Chaim, who's going to talk about Hashem and receiving the Torah, which is of course very appropriate for today. So what's going on? Let me Eliyahu Chaim.
Okay.
One sec, wait, 1 minute.
Perfect.
Okay, we can start now. Slow.
Good Yom Tov, everyone, and I'm gonna say this story and everything. Now, there's a question saying, why do we say akdamos? It's like a poem or like a special poem. We say on Shavuot, but why do we say on Shavuot? This is it's go on and stuff. By Kriyas Torah, the Matan Torah, on this morning we read 5 Olos De'im, calls up by the subject of Matan Torah from Parshas Yisro. After the Kohen is called up, he is showed the place where they will begin. When we sing Akdumas, a special poem, a beat poem, which praises the Rebbeinu Shalom, which is Hashem, and the Torah with a special Baal Kaira, a slave.
So the Baal Koira, the laner,
The laner
sings 2 lines.
It sings 2 lines, and the Tzibor, the public, sings 2 lines too. The basic legend of an authorship of Akdumois poem is as follows: an evil bishop, like someone who does like
Bishop. They know what's a bishop.
Who was known to use to kishuf, like black magic. There was like they had like a very powers thing. Black magic analyzing, used his power to kill many Jews. He killed like billions of Jews with his powers. He challenged the Jews to this area, to a duel, and promised not to harm any more Jews if they would defeat him in the duel. So if they won, he would not hurt anymore. The Jews decided that they had to contact the other Jews and the Asaras HaShvatim, the 10 tribes. Who were exiled to the other bank of the river,
Sabbation River.
River. They were sure that they were able to provide someone who can defeat this bishop using all the
holy power, the Kedusha.
The problem was that the river, the Spedon, tossed rocks all because there was a lot of rocks everywhere, making it passage impossible. The only possibility to cross it was on Shabbos, but that's when we rest. You can't on Shabbos we relax. You're not allowed to. However, only the messenger of the Aseres HaShvatim, the 10 tribes, can return. Since he was the one who needed to defeat the bishop, the messenger of the Jews cannot return. Since it would be desecration Shabbat, it would be Rabbi Meir Ba'arbi Yitzchak, a big rabbi, the
rabbi of Worms in Germany.
Was chosen for the mission. Rashi, there's another tzaddik.
He quotes him.
Tehillim quotes him. Before he left, knowing that he would never return, he wrote the holy words of Akdumos, the poet. He was successful in the mission, and the terrorists of Shavuot sent back
10 tribes.
the 10 tribes sent back a person who defeated the bishop. So basically, because he done this poem, he defeated the bishop. If they didn't do it, he would kill the Jews still, and they can die, all of them. Yeah. And because he done these special words for Makdumas, he died, and so it's special to him. Now I'll just talk about something else. Shavuot means swear, right? Yeah. And now one thing, why is it meaning swear? Now, before we go, when we were like in heaven, before we came down to a baby, we say to Hashem, that I don't want to go down there. It's hard. We have to work. I want to stay here. It's relaxing. I don't have to do any work, nothing. But it says if you be down this world, you have a chance getting Olam Haba, which is like also another world of heaven, like a good heaven, and you can have a very good chance of getting Olam Haba. And if you're here, you have no chance. There's no chance of you getting Olam Haba. But if you're down there in the world, you have a chance of getting Olam Haba. So we swear to Hashem, like not exactly what we kind of swear, that we will try not to do various like bad things. And if we do this, then we can get heaven, we can get Olam Haba, and we can also get it from Mashiach, and so on.
That's why Shavuot is called swearing. We're swearing. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good Yom Tov, everyone.
Thank you.
Shkoyach. Thank you very much, Shkoyach. Does anybody have any questions for Eliyahu Chaim, or any comments that they'd like to make before we move on to Barbara?
Well done, Eliyahu. It was brilliant. Well done.
Rabbi, you're going to have to share the pulpit sermon with him from now on.
Yes, I do. When I was his age, I was also motivated to speak in front of the post. I'm very happy. Slowly.
Oh, like father, like son.
Yeah.
You should be very, very proud.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well done then. No questions.
Is your grandpa listening too? Is he still with you?
I don't know.
He's upstairs. No.
He's doing some work.
Oh,
He was
you'll have to give it to him.
Yeah.
But I think he's had to leave. But you have to make sure.
I'm leaving. He's going to stay all for Shavuot.
No, I mean, I think he's left this meeting is what I meant. He was logged in.
He was here. Very nice.
Earlier on. So if you miss it, but I'm sure you'll give him your talk as well at some time over Yom Tov.
I do have a question. You mentioned that we do 2 lines from the Shaliach Tzibor and 2 lines from the community. We don't do that.
Yeah, that was different minhagim, but yes.
It's not every minhag does it, but you don't have to do it. It's not a half, but it's a minhag. It's a mitzvah.
But wait, listen to Brian. So what you're saying, our minhag is what, Brian?
We just read it to ourselves, but it would actually be a nice way of doing that we participate.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Usually whoever's doing the laning who does it, isn't it?
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, certainly that's what I've done previously.
What, alternate verses?
No, just the person doing the laning.
Yeah, just reads it.
Yeah. My recollection is the Hebrew is extremely difficult, so probably not something for people who haven't prepared it to sight read, unless their Hebrew reading is superb.
It's only 4 pages long in the art scroll.
Thanks, Brian.
At least we don't have to say it at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Okay, well, in that case, I will say thank you very much, Eliyahu Chaim. Another excellent talk this afternoon. And now let's move on to Barbara Cohen, who's going to talk about Holocaust Learning UK and their docufilm. And I've just, for those who want to, I'll be showing the trailer at the end of her talk. And for those who want to know more about it, I've just put the hyperlink in for people who might want to, if you missed it and want to see that a bit later. So Barbara, over to you.
Well, thank you, Jenny, and well done, Eliyahu Chaim. And you're quite right, Lionel, it's very hard to follow children, especially when they're so knowledgeable. Jenny asked me to talk for a few minutes about Holocaust Learning UK. As many of you know, we started life as Northwood Holocaust Memorial Day events. And this was in response to the establishment of a National Holocaust Memorial Day in 2001. Valerie Meller had the idea of using this milestone as the opportunity for us to play some small part in helping youngsters to understand something of the Holocaust and other genocides, and where these can lead. The aim was to improve their understanding of how the Holocaust came about, and importantly, to understand enough too, to challenge all forms of discrimination, racism, and anti-Semitism now and in the future. So big aims. It was a great idea and a very timely initiative. Another great thing about it was that the two Northwood shuls got together, and with the support of our rabbis at that time, Andrew Goldstein at NPLS and Naftali Brower at NUS, ensured that this truly was a communal project. We invited schools to come to us, and we developed a half-day program, the highlight of which was always the opportunity to hear the testimony of a survivor. The survivors were terrific. Many of them had not told their stories for decades, but they decided to speak up. Their histories were compelling and absorbing, like I said, exhausting, and the impact that they had on our student visitors was extraordinary. Sharman Burwald led the NUS team, and I think I caught sight of Melvin at some point here this afternoon, and she was ably assisted by many members of the community. Others got to hear about this initiative, and by 2020, we were a group of 9 partner synagogues. We upped our game. With guidance from the Holocaust education charities, we tried to professionalize as far as we could. The quality of our teaching material met much higher standards, and we strove to be consistent across all our venues. We also got more organized in other ways. I suppose we grew up a bit, really. We adopted the name Holocaust Learning UK to reflect the fact that we were no longer simply a Northwood organisation. We became a registered charity. Some schools struggled to visit us because of the cost. What we offered was free, but coach travel was a constraint, as was the need to employ extra staff at times to accompany the students. This was becoming an increasingly challenging issue. And then COVID struck and the world changed. Schools could not come out to us, nor survivors, nor community members, or nor volunteers, but we exist to provide Holocaust learning. And so, like many other organizations, we had to adapt fast. And that's where Out of the Darkness comes in. We made a movie. And that was a learning experience in itself. We met Tapestry Pictures through Shelley, one of our joint committee members and a key member of our training team. Tapestry are small, highly professional, and completely empathetic towards what we were trying to do. At first, we thought we could do a scaled down version of our usual events so that our regular customers could identify with a familiar process. But COVID, as we all know, throws its own curveballs just to keep us on our toes. So first we needed a survivor whose story would be central to our narrative. Enter Sharman, who happened to mention that Janine Webber, who had long been a favourite at our events, was frustrated that lockdown had limited her activities and she was no longer able to go out to schools and organisations as she had been wont. So we called Janine and invited her to be the star in our movie. And she is such a trooper. She said yes immediately, and subsequently proved very flexible as we set out to make it all happen. We had three aspects to the narrative arc of our film. A, the background to the Holocaust, key events and dates. B, our survivors' story. And C, our team of young actors who represent other survivors and also raise the questions that young people rightly will ask. In many ways, they represent the cohort of youngsters who had traditionally come to our events. We had to research and produce a script, and then we had to film all the parts while simultaneously ensuring that social distancing was respected, that our potentially vulnerable leading lady was not exposed to any risk, that our student actors were similarly protected, and that we could get most of the actual filming done in one day when we had access to studios. Everyone was hyper flexible, and Tapestry were brilliant in ensuring that it all happened as planned, right down to providing tea and coffee and sandwiches for everyone throughout what turned out to be a pretty long day. The filming day covered the student actors who had been auditioned online and sent their scripts in advance so that they could rehearse. And Janine, our survivor speaker, who had to be kept separate from the student actors, and the out of the darkness backdrop of candles and candle lighting. The Rabbi's introduction was filmed separately and again, somewhat later than planned because of COVID and quarantining. Then there was all the research and accessing of historical archive material. And we got familiar with the terminology, the painstaking and detailed post-production work. We also needed someone who would be unseen to narrate. And Jason Isaacs, an actor in consistent demand, best known perhaps through the Harry Potter films, generously agreed to take on the task, recording his script from a small recording studio in his home. By some sort of miracle, the film was completed in time for Holocaust Memorial Day. And we had our virtual premiere at the beginning of February, and I think some of you saw it then. It has been available for screening since then, and the screening window for 2021 will close at the end of May. It's been quite an undertaking and lots of work for lots of people, but we're thrilled at the result. Out of the Darkness has been greeted with huge enthusiasm and admiration. It is available to schools free of charge, and we currently have getting on for 60,000 students who are registered to see it, predominantly in the UK, but in pockets elsewhere as well. Many of you will have seen the film at some point, and we hope that you also feel that it delivers its message in a fresh and compelling way. We have, after a lot of thought, plans for how we might move forward. We're excited by the fact that we can share this Holocaust learning much more widely than we were able to do before. We are hugely grateful for everybody's interest and enthusiasm for it. And so I'd just like to finish this little episode by asking Jenny to put us onto the trailer for the film. And if any of you haven't seen the film and would like to, then get in touch with me or get in touch with us, and we'll ensure that, that you get to do that. Thank you.
The Nazis targeted hundreds of thousands of people who didn't fit into their vision.
You can't go to the police station and say that you've been robbed because you're a person without rights. We had to fight for our lives. I couldn't speak for 50 years. I wanted to forget.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it would be appropriate to go straight from Barbara's talk to Valerie's, and then perhaps we can have questions or discussion after the two of them, because they are somewhat related. So is that all right with you, Valerie? Where is Valerie?
Yeah, that's fine, Jenny. I'll let you start.
Okay, let me just share screen again. So Valerie is talking about Hannah Shenesh and sorry, that's not working.
It's fine. You can hear the music. That's fine. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks. I'll carry on.
Yep.
You've just heard, sung in Ivrit by Chaim Topol, Eli, Eli. It was originally a poem entitled Walking to Caesarea by Hannah Shenesh. My God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rustle of the water, lightning of the heavens, the prayer of man. I first came across these beautiful words when I sang with the Zemel choir. Knowing the life story of Hannah Shenesh, I found them hard to sing as they brought a lump to my throat, and they still do. Hannah Shenesh was born in Hungary on the 17th of July, 1921, the daughter of Bela Shenesh, a journalist and playwright, and his wife Catherine, Cato. Hannah had a younger brother, Georgi. Their father died when Hannah was 6, but she inherited his literary ability, writing poetry all her life and keeping a diary. Her family was not religiously observant, but as she grew up, she became aware of strong anti-Semitism in Hungary. She was drawn to Zionist activities in Budapest and joined a Zionist students' organization. On leaving school in 1939, Hannah left Hungary and went to British-mandated Palestine, where she took a 2-year course at the Witzo Nahalal Agricultural School. 2 years later, she made her home in Kibbutz Sdot Yam, and she joined the paramilitary Haganah. In 1943, she joined the British Women's Auxiliary Air Force and was recruited into the SOE, the Special Operations Executive. After training, she was a fully qualified parachutist and radio operator. In 1941, Yugoslavia had been invaded by the Axis powers, but by 1943, the country was the democratic federal Yugoslavia, communist-led and anti-fascist. It was into Yugoslavia that Hannah parachuted with others in March 1944, spending several months with Tito's partisans. Her orders were to make her way to Hungary, where she would help the Allied efforts in Europe by establishing contact with partisan resistance fighters and also aid Jews to escape from that country. Hungary had been invaded by Hitler's troops in March, and the deportation of Jews had started immediately, with 4 trains a day, each holding 3,000 Jews leaving Hungary for Auschwitz. The deportations were supervised by a Sonderkommando led by Adolf Eichmann. Hannah's mission was not accomplished, for she was detained by Hungarian police at the border, they having found her radio transmitter. She was imprisoned and tortured, but gave nothing away, even when threats were made about what could happen to her mother, who was still in Hungary at that time. Even in jail, she continued to write poetry. Accused of treason, she was sent for trial in October 1944, found guilty, and was executed by firing squad the following month, on the 7th of November 1944. She was 23 years old. In 1950, her remains were taken to Israel, first to her kibbutz of Sdot Yam, and then they were reburied on Mount Herzl in the military cemetery. She left behind a small suitcase containing diaries and poetry notebooks. Her mother, who by then had emigrated to Israel, published her daughter's work posthumously. A very brave woman, Hannah revealed nothing either under torture or at her trial or at her execution, and she refused to wear a blindfold at that execution. Her idealism, commitment, and courage were outstanding, and in Israel she is rightly considered a national heroine. Thank you, and I wish Hag Sameach Shavuot to everyone.
Thank you very much. Any comments on either of the last two talks, which, as you can see, are related but very different aspects?
She's Hannah Zenish is very much a girl's heroine, as hearing her story as a little girl. But there are definite parallels with Ellie Cohen, although I'm sure there were many more that we just don't know about.
Of course.
Very interesting.
I don't know how many people here have watched the whole docu-film and what you thought of it.
Well, of course I did, and I thought it was excellent.
Well, of course I did and thought the same.
Well, I'm independent, and I watched it too, and John watched it, and we both thought it was excellent. Yes, but obviously, going forward, it's important not to lose the face-to-face contact with the school children.
Well, Melvin and I are working on the teachers' evaluation, and one of the questions is whether in future, if they were offered, whether people would come in, bring students in person, would show the docu-film, or would do both. Watch this space. We haven't got the answers yet. But obviously people who are watching from the Scottish Highlands and Islands and various other places in the northeast of England and all sorts of other places would probably not be coming in person, at least not to our London and southeast groups of schools.
Coming from Plymouth, can I just say this? Coming from Plymouth and being involved with the community in Plymouth, they made their own Holocaust film, which I forwarded the link to Barbara. I know she looked at it. It was quite different. It approached the event from a different angle. It wasn't exclusively done by the Jewish community. It was I think, interfaith community in Plymouth also had some say. But what struck me most of all was that the mayor of Plymouth, the Lord Mayor of Plymouth, he's a Lord Mayor, was actually in his total regalia with his tricorn hat and chain of office round his neck. And I thought, Barbara, I don't see you wearing that. So stay as you are.
Well, thank you, thank you, Valerie. Actually, I really enjoyed the Plymouth offering, and it was, great that they did it. Yes. I think one of the things that we need to remember is that, explicitly we are setting out to educate secondary school age students, so that what we have done is targeted very much towards young people.
Yes.
And, that's always in our mind.
I think sorry to interrupt, but having the young actors as well, I think was a brilliant idea, because they're the age of, or similar age to the audience that you're aiming to. So there's that, that connection then, isn't there, for the young people?
I think that's right. I think a lot of the reactions that we've been getting have, explicitly said that, and I'm sure that with the stats work that Jenny's doing, that might come out.
It was just the right length too, as a resource for pupils. That there's lots of long films about the Holocaust, but this, I think, has a unique place. It encompasses everything within a brief time span, and I think that's pretty good.
Lionel, that was just the trailer.
No, I've seen the film.
All right, sorry.
Yes, I was talking about the film. Sorry, no. I thought I could tell the difference.
Apologies.
No, I thought it was a great film, but sufficiently, pupils' attention span isn't very great, and that seemed to cover it all within a very short space of time. I think it's very good.
Yeah,
I'll say welcome to everyone who's joined us.
We haven't actually seen the film. Is it still available on YouTube? Because I've just looked it up, and there's so many films called Out of the Darkness.
I think if you sort of get back to me,
yeah,
we'll see that you get a guest registration, and then you can sign in as a registered guest and watch it whenever you want.
Thank you. I think Zaki would like to see that as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Barbara, is there a minimum age you think that for showing it?
Yeah, we sort of say not younger than 12. Is that right, Linda? Is she still there? Don't know.
She's still there, but she's muted.
Unmuted for that. Yes, absolutely. No children under 12.
So maybe wait for Zaki for a little longer?
Yeah, that would be our recommendation.
He's nearly 12 anyway.
Oh, good.
12 in August.
Nearly there then. That's fine.
Well, if nobody's got any other comments to make on those last two excellent presentations, I'd like to move to our last speaker, who is Anne Leach, who's going to talk about a very different topic. I think he's very different, hair.
When the request came out for speakers for this tikkun, I immediately associated it with our grandson's Opshurim, which will take place next Sunday. Those of you who heard my talk last year, at last year's tikkun, may remember that our younger daughter is Balat Teshuvah, that is, a Jew who has become religiously observant. The consequence of this is that we have had to learn a lot over the last 15 years or so. Of course, now that our third grandson is about to have his hair cut for the first time at the age of 3, we are old hands at the ritual. But it did get me thinking about the significance and symbolism of hair within and without the Jewish religion. What I didn't expect was for my research to grow like Topsy with connections to hair wherever I looked. After I thought my preparation was complete, my older daughter, who was completely unaware of its content, sent me a link to Laura Marks, yes, Mitzvah Day Laura Marks, talking to Radio 2's Zoe Ball on Pause for Thought. She said, "Our hair is our choice, an expression of ourselves." Only yesterday in Shul, when I was browsing Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, I came across the following in chapter 6, verse 6. Rabbi Shimon ben Judah said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, "Beauty, strength, wealth, honor, wisdom, old age, gray hair, and children are fitting for the righteous and for the world, as it is said, gray hair is a crown of glory. It is attained by way of righteousness." And it says, "The glory of the young is their strength. The majesty of their old is their gray hair." When I told one friend the title of my talk, her response was, "Samson." Well, I hadn't intended to make reference to the Nazarite, but I'll just say that this is someone who makes vows, usually within a specified time limit, to renounce grape or any of its products, not come in contact with the dead, and not cut his or her hair. This holy calling, separated from worldly pleasure, allows for an extremely spiritual lifestyle, with days dedicated to meditation, prayer, and complete service of God. The date Jenny's request for speakers went out was April the 12th, the same day that the nation was joyously queuing for haircuts at barbers and hairdressers. And this also set me thinking about the importance our hair has to our identity, Jewish and not. Let's start with the opshearing. Well, I've already told you it's the first haircut for boys at the age of 3, but why? This valued tradition has no halachic or Talmudic precedent. However, it dates back at least 400 years. The first explicit mention of this tradition relates how Rabbi Isaac Luria, one of the great Kabbalists, performed this ceremony with his own son in the city of Meron in Israel at the resting place of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. I did not know when I learned this that the whole world would soon know the name of Meron because of the recent tragedy at Lag BaOmer. I also did not know that Melvin's paternal grandmother's name was Luria, and he had been told by his father that she was descended from generations of Luria Rabbonim. So there may be a trace of Sephardim in the Leach genes. Indeed, the opshearing ceremony was generally confined to Sephardim or Eastern European Hasidim, but in recent years it has enjoyed a more general popularity. When I was a girl, I remember being told we were not supposed to enter into the study of Kabbalah. I have since read that some say learning about mystical aspects is not only permitted, but essential. One of the sections of the Zohar, the ancient Kabbalistic text, is dedicated almost exclusively to the discussion of hair and its source in the divine reality. Jewish mysticism believes that hair contains profound energy. According to the Zohar, from the hair of a person, you can know who he is. Opshearing, or opshearing-ish, or upshearing, or upshuren, you say either and I'll say either, has been interpreted with the favorite precedent being the biblical law of Orleth in Leviticus 19:23, which forbids the eating of a fruit until a tree has passed its 3rd year. Just as a person is compared to a tree in the field, so the child, reaching the ripe age of 3, will grow in knowledge and good deeds. The Hebrew word for haircut is sapir, which means a boundary. The haircut sets new standards of behavior, as on this day, the boy begins his Torah education. It is customary to dip the child's finger in honey and place it on Hebrew letters to bring home the sweetness of learning. His payot or payas are left intact, the initiation into his first mitzvah. The peyot are the sign that shows he is a Jew. From this point on, he is taught to wear a kippah and tzitzit, and trained to recite blessings and the Shema. Everyone present takes a turn to cut a snippet of hair, and many follow the practice of giving the child money to give to tzedakah. The child often recites the Torah verse, Torah Tzivah Lanu Moshe. When lockdown began last year and the shul closed, I got into the habit of reading the article about the weekly Sedra from Shabbat Shalom, the wonderful publication which the United Synagogue distributed in 2019. I also decided to tackle the Bible to be read as literature, a mighty tome that was given to my father as a prize for general progress at West Ham Secondary School in 1937. I was getting on famously, but when I reached Leviticus, I was confronted by a page telling me that much of the book is concerned with the minutiae of ritual, and presumably because of this, only 2.5 pages are devoted to it, one of the 5 books of Moses. At a Kabbalat Shabbat Zoom session, Rabbi Zerbib referred to Acharei Mos Kedoshim as his favorite, or perhaps one of his favorite Sedra, because of the many moral laws it contains. In particular, to love your neighbor as yourself, keep accurate weights and measures, not put a stumbling block before the blind, and respect our elders. He asked us to read the whole Sedra over Shabbat. And it was then that I discovered that this famous double Sedra contains the laws of Oleh, as well as the ones to leave the hair not rounded. So these laws are in good company. When I returned to my Bible to be read as literature, which minutiae had the compiler chosen to include in those 2.5 pages selected from the whole of Leviticus? You guessed it. All those moral laws which are key to our daily existence, and the ones about the tree and the hair. You shall not round off the corners on your head or destroy the corners of your beard. The first part of the pasuk explains the payers, the second, beards. I'm going on to beards now. According to the 12th century Maimonides, this prohibition was a way to differentiate Jews from idolatrous priests who shaved their beards. This may also explain why the high priest is also told not to shave his locks. The prohibition on shaving has traditionally been understood as barring the complete removal of the hair with a razor. Because for centuries it was generally too difficult to achieve a close shave without a razor, so observant Jewish men tended to be bearded. According to the historian Rabbi Beryl Wayne, or Ween, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, beard norms began to change among some Orthodox men in Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries, when chemical depilators became available, enabling hair removal without a razor. More recently, the advent of electric shavers makes it possible to achieve a close shave without a razor actually touching the skin. As a result, many men today do shave their beards while continuing to follow Orthodox interpretation of Jewish law. However, it remains customary in most ultra-Orthodox circles to retain one's beard as a sign of piety. Some Jewish men who usually do shave nonetheless allow their facial hair to grow during periods of mourning. This is traditionally done for 30 days following the death of a close relative. It is also traditionally observed during 2 annual periods of communal mourning. The Omer period between Pesach and Shavuot, when Jews mourn the deaths of the students of Rabbi Akiva, and the 3 weeks between the fast days of the 17th Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, when Jews mourn the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. Lag Bomer, as a day of celebration, is a day on which haircuts are allowed. And this year, my middle grandson proudly sent me a photograph of his newly cut short back, but of course not sons. The Jewish Chronicle has a Rabbi I have a problem column, and a question was asked as to why people choose to follow the strictest interpretations of Jewish law. Why don't they go for a lenient option? Rabbi Naftali Brauer suggested there are sociological, psychological, and spiritual perspectives. From a sociological perspective, individuals who wish to belong to a particular group tend to signal their belonging by adopting practices or dress codes that are unique to their group. From a psychological perspective, there are those for whom rules and boundaries are important, conferring structure and routine. From a spiritual perspective, halacha is not so much a list of cumbersome rules, but an extraordinary opportunity to live a life imbued with divine purpose. In France, it is against the law to wear a head covering in state schools. In Pimlico recently, pupils demonstrated and 32 teachers resigned because a new head teacher introduced draconian, or traditional, depending on your point of view, new regulations regarding matters of curriculum, uniform, and hairstyle, including specifically stating that hairstyles that block the views of others would not be permitted, and hijabs should not be too colourful. Hair is an emotive issue, whether we cover it, cut it, or don't. This is not the place to explore why Muslim women and girls cover their hair and faces, but why do Jewish women cover their hair? Looking into the origins of why married Jewish women cover their hair, there are references to the biblical ritual of sota, when a woman accused of adultery had her fidelity questioned by the uncovering of her hair. Subsequently, one finds arguments for and against a biblical requirement for hair covering, while standards of modesty are used as a justification instead. Modesty, tznius, as a Jewish value, is continually being refined and redefined by Jewish women and their communities. Just as some women have chosen to de-emphasize hair covering as a marker of modesty, in other communities, women may choose to embrace it, developing and reinforcing a more traditional communal norm. Rebbetzin Fager Tversky says, the concept of tznius cautions us that to get seduced by a culture that is obsessed with externalities is to abandon our very core and essence. Modesty is not about being unattractive, but about a barrier, a cognitive separation that one is unavailable, keeping certain parts of one's body private. As modesty is subjectively defined, the community to which one wishes to belong may play a large role in determining practice. In some communities, women cover their shekels or wigs with a hat so that no one can mistake it for their natural hair. When my daughter married, she found that in certain situations, she was drawing more attention to her appearance by wearing a hat rather than a shekel or wig. Indeed, when I have collected my grandchildren from the playground of their school, I am self-conscious as being in a minority of one by wearing a hat rather than a wig. The rationale is not to draw attention to oneself. So this concept of tznius, modesty, demands conformity depending on the milieu in which a woman finds herself. The decision to cover one's hair rests at the crossroad between law and custom, personal choice, and community identification. It seems to me that some sections of the Jewish community get unduly troubled by the appearance of other Jews who belong to other strands. Some years ago, in the foyer of the Jewish Museum in Camden, there was a photographic display of a variety of people, and the viewer was invited to identify the Jews. The reality was they were all Jews. Latterly, in the Board of Deputies Commission into Racial Inclusivity, Stephen Bush noticed that Black British Jews make up a little under 0.5% of the Jewish population, just as Jews make up a little under 0.5% of the UK population as a whole. In the 21st century, in the UK, we are fortunate to be able to identify as Jews in any way we like. Yes, we have to tackle anti-Semitism, and yes, we will tackle any racism, but we are all Jews. As individuals and as Jews, we choose how we wear or cover our hair as part of our identity. I should know. I've had mine long, short, curly, straightened, but still not coloured, and I've a cupboard full of shawl hats. I respect the rights of all my fellow Jews to wear their hair and beards as they see fit, and look forward to our grandson's Opshire next weekend as he proclaims his.
Ishkar. Any comments from anybody? Any discussion points? We have a few minutes left. Or anything anybody wants to say related to any? I'll just remind you of our whole program that we've had this afternoon, in case there's anybody who wants to make any comments about any of these. We've lost Zaki, but our other speakers are all still here. Well, I'll say thank you very much to Anne, and I'll say, all right, let me stop sharing. Rabbi, is there anything that you'd like to say about any of the, oh, sorry, Sally, are you trying to say something?
Yes, I've been listening in the background. I have been here all the time, and I just want to make a comment about Anne's interesting talk. I seem to remember having a conversation with our former Rebbitzin Alana about a Rebbitzin, as you say, about conforming and not standing out. And she made the comment once when she turned up to shul with a hat on that she was conforming to our norm in shul. So I just thought it was an interesting comment, which has sort of been worrying me for a few years now, but it finally falls into place. So thank you.
I think that was a hat on top of her sheitel.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course, on top of
if I may. Sorry?
Marsha got her hand up just before you did.
Before the Rabbi, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Wonderful contributions this afternoon, and thanks, Jenny, for organising it all. I just wanted to actually raise a point about hair and Anne's comment. And actually, I saw Ilana, our previous Rebbitzin, last week, and she didn't have a hat on, so she had her hair. Very interesting. I don't know if some people saw this. It was out on Facebook. It seems to be authentic, but you talked about Meron and the connection with Ushpirin at the beginning, and actually something that came out of the tragedy at Meron. I don't know how many of you saw this, but there was a letter that circulated amongst the ultra Orthodox in Israel, blaming the tragedy at Meron on women who were wearing what was described, it was a translation, but as lacy sheitels. And the reason that there was this idea that the wrath of God had poured down because the men were not, the religious men were not checking their women for wearing lacy sheitels. Obviously, this went out on Facebook, and lots and lots of people obviously condemned it and said, you know, what happened was a terrible accident, and how is this? But there does seem to be, you know, of course, that was all based around modesty, and you know, the women were being immodest. And I just wondered if you had any comments on that, because this is not the first time, obviously not associated with such a tragedy, but this is not the first time I've heard things about women and their hair coverings from perhaps the extreme right wing within world Jewry.
I think there is a continuum of Jewry, and the assumption that the ultra Orthodox are extreme and going along, you know, it depends where you are on the spectrum yourself, what you consider to be extreme or ultra. My personal experience, involvement, if you like, at a distance from that community, particularly the young women that I know amongst my daughter's circle of friends, are women who are making their own choices. How they cover their hair, how they interpret the laws of SNEAS, what they cover or don't cover, and so on. They are empowered to make their own choices. And I think particularly with those who are Baal Teshuvah, those are all very conscious decisions. It's nothing about the men telling them what to do. That's my humble opinion.
Jenny, do I have the right to speak here? Yeah, okay.
Please do.
Thank you. Just to mention, I don't know how other Orthodox see tznius and modesty about, but there's no problem in standing out. The opposite, a woman should be always beautiful and always stand out. And I think this is a big mistake people make when it comes to modesty. Modesty has nothing to do with standing out or looking beautiful or putting nice. It's not to show parts of the body that are supposed to be covered. Now, if the hair is supposed to be covered, then you need to cover the hair. If it's not supposed to be covered, then it's not a part. It's not because you're showing out or not showing out, whatever it is. So that's why, wigs, if it's not the hair, then it doesn't matter. Then yes, the opposite. A woman should always be beautiful and glamorous and be outstanding, whatever she wants. Or putting a hat, not putting a hat, it doesn't matter. Just to say that point. And I think there's a big issue to understand what modesty is in the eyes of the Torah, and not at all as how it's being brought and advertised to the wild world. And another point regarding what Marsha says: whoever says to you what God, what's the intentions? Of course, he doesn't know. And if I look at the greatest rabbi in the generation of this generation, that's Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, and they asked him about Miron. And the answer he said is, first of all, it's a gzeira from Hashem. We don't know the reason. But if you want to work on something, if you want to be, become a better and work on a behavior that maybe you can work on this, on davening, whatever it is. But first of all, we don't know the reasons why Hashem did what he did. That's the axiom. Whoever says to you he knows, I would love to speak to his direct line with God. It's fantastic. I'm looking for that for years. That's very important to know that. That's it.
Thank you. Well, as it's now virtually 4 o'clock, and some of us have probably got a bit more preparing to do before Yom Tov, I will say thank you very much to all of today's fantastic speakers, or this afternoon's fantastic speakers, because we have another 7 lined up for you this evening. I would remind you that Ian Patterson would like all speakers to send them their whole talk or a summary of their talk as you wish, and I will send out an email in a moment. I'd like to apologise to anybody who tried to get in on Thursday and either wasted a lot of time or failed entirely to join us, but I'm glad you're here today, and I look forward to seeing all of you and lots of other people at 6:30 for the 3rd session, which will finish shortly after 8 o'clock, with people who are actually going to shul finishing well by 8 o'clock. So we may have to have less discussion this evening to get all the timings.
And Jenny, thank you very much for managing this afternoon so very efficiently and easily and charmingly.
All your talking and discussions, and I hope to see you all later on.